I know that some of my fellow panelists are going to be going through some case studies of some specific examples, but I was asked to kind of link to those examples kind of a broad view of some of the options that were available to you. And then I saw Francois's presentation earlier, and I said, well, I'm going to have to modify a little bit of what I talk about. Because many of the options that are available to you do deal with, as Mark pointed out, shrinking, managing, or hedging, or as Francois pointed out, some specific ways to manage your liabilities to make them smaller. And as we think through those, just a couple of kind of broad comments that I'd like to overlay in this environment. One is the issue that Philip raised of whether your members are advantaged or disadvantaged by this. As participants in the CBI and thinking about industry, what does our relationship with our employees mean for the UK broadly? I think the social consequence of the decisions that we take should be considered. It should be part of our lobbying and the way we think about it. John put up a slide earlier noting that active members of defined benefit plans generate a cost of about 20% of their salary. And those of you who are fortunate enough to be in an open defined benefit plan probably think, that's nice to have, but I'm not going to retire in luxury. When we look at our friends in civil service and we think, well, they might be, the value of their pensions might be 25% of salary. They're also not retiring in luxury. So moves that go from defined benefit plans with that kind of cost level to defined contribution plans at, well, if you're in the United States, 4% of salary. If you're here, maybe 8 or 10% of salary, are creating a population of people dramatically undersaved for retirement. And I think those of us in the pension industry, those of us in business, need to be aware of that and think about how we can make sure that our employees, that the population as a whole, is appropriately prepared for what will turn out to be a longer time in retirement than many of them anticipate. I'm going to wonder if the next slide is mine. So with those thoughts in mind, moving on to managing your liability risk. MetLife Assurance did a study recently where we asked finance directors who have defined benefit plans how important managing these plans were compared to some of their other business objectives. And 2/3 of them ranked the importance of managing their pension liabilities pretty much in line with other typical business objectives that you might have. So we probed a little further and we said, okay, you said that that was important to manage. What are you doing about it? And 54% of the respondents said, I have no idea. It's important, but I really don't know what to do. That may be why some of you are here at this session today. And so going through this list of options, I think, may give you some ideas of the range of things that you can consider in conjunction with your trustees and your advisors about what options are available to you. Beginning with benefit adjustments, some of these have been talked about before by some of the other speakers, so I'd like to bring out a couple of items which haven't been mentioned yet. With respect to transfer values, the regulatory environment for transfer values is changing. There are consultation papers out there. There's guidance from the TPR saying that enhanced transfer values are to be looked at skeptically, that possibly they're not in the member interest. You balance that with the fact that transfer values are a statutory right that the trustee has to provide, and you wonder, what are we supposed to do as trustees? Couple that with emerging regulation that says defined contribution schemes can no longer accept contracted out benefits into them. So now how do you transfer those rights? So when you think about transfer values generally, I think this aspect of the regulatory environment in which you're doing both the statutory standard everyday transfer values and any enhanced transfer value exercise needs to be considered. One trustee that I know says in talking to his corporate sponsor, he always puts on the table the idea that we should be calculating the maximum possible value for these members. What's the most we can give rather than the least we can give? Because even at that calculation, removing regulatory risk, administrative risk, future improvements in longevity, you're de-risking the scheme substantially, even if you look at it from that perspective. Indexation exchanges, recently mentioned as well. Our experience with schemes that have gone through voluntary exchanges indicates that the take-up rate is very high. very high. Even if you're really upfront with the member about the fact that they're not getting actuarially fair value, they'll still take it. And you think, well, why is that? Why are they doing that? Well, pension plans by their nature are shifting risk and shifting assets from members who have short service and die quickly to members who have long service and live a long time. They're skewed in that nature. So you might be thinking, my contributions are roughly 20% of salary for everybody, but it's the ones who live a long time that get the value out of that. When you remove indexation, you're swinging that pendulum back a little bit more towards the neutral point, so that your members who do pass away quickly after retirement have higher benefits while they were alive and higher benefits for their dependents after they're gone. It's a transition, it's a trade-off between classes within your membership, which I think makes a lot of sense, and in addition, removes longevity risk for you. Most defined benefit plans in the United States do not have guaranteed indexation. They do. It's not even like the Dutch plans, which have conditional indexation. They do ad hoc indexation in the United States. If there's enough money, maybe we'll give you something, maybe we won't. And one of the trade-offs for that is that the issue of longevity risk in the United States is substantially reduced. Another 50 basis points on your assets covers 2 or 3 years more of longevity. You don't see that here in the UK. Another year of longevity is a significant multiplier to the cost of your pension plan, and so reducing indexation does help with that. It's not a free lunch, though. It probably increases your PPF levy. It's your Section 143 valuation. So like many things in the pension world, there's trade-offs. There's advantages and disadvantages of doing them. Quickly touch on your discretionary factors. In this current environment with increasing longevity expectations and low interest rates, I can almost guarantee that your cost-neutral factors for early retirement, for young spouses, et cetera, are not actually cost-neutral. That's a quick and easy win. Take a look at those, update them. It won't cost you a whole lot in advisor fees to do. Most scheme rules allow that to be done by the trustees quite simply, and it'll save you some money. Interest rate and inflation hedging has been talked about, growing popularity there. We haven't yet talked a whole lot about the CPI, RPI issue that's coming up, but there are investment banks starting to look at making CPI hedging available. We've written things encouraging the Treasury and the DMO to think about issuing CPI-linked gilts just to see if we can manage to hedge that risk if it comes in. So both of these benefit adjustments addressing liabilities, both of these are addressing your assets, making sure their assets move in line with the liabilities, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more in the Q&A. Moving on to longevity insurance and longevity swaps, I particularly use the distinction of the two things. Partly I'm looking ahead to changes in IFRS. The exposure draft on insurance seems to indicate that an indemnity arrangement, so a longevity trade which is specific to the members of your scheme, is an insurance contract, and an indexed arrangement, a longevity trade that's based on, say, some function of the UK population, is not an insurance contract. So accounting for those two things will probably be different, and the impact for your scheme will be different. The indemnity trade, the longevity insurance, covers both systemic risk, will general populations live longer, and the idiosyncratic risk of your specific members, who lives and who dies, whereas the swap trade only covers the systemic risk. Both of these kind of trades also cover what I call scheme actuary risk. Whatever happens to longevity for real, there's always the question of what your scheme actuary decides is the appropriate way to value your scheme today. And sometimes those changes can be more dramatic to the valuation and your accounting than the economic reality. So in the marketplace today, these seem to be available for large schemes that are still open to accrual, still growing their liability base, and kind of with the philosophy that they do not intend to wind up ever. A longevity trade hasn't demonstrated itself to be a particularly good hedge against buyout or buy-in prices yet. A lot of people working on that, though. Annuity as an asset class, or the buy-in, well, in some sense, this feels like a new thing. In some sense, it's a very old thing. probably within the memory of some of us here working with defined benefit plans as long as we have. We know that it was not uncommon for you to buy an annuity for your member when they reach retirement. And we look at a lot of schemes today that have kind of a block of annuities for people who are now in their late 70s and early 80s, because that's just what you did. They reached retirement, you bought an annuity. That kind of faded away for a period, and it seems to be coming back. The idea that the valuation of your pension or liability is not that far off from an annuity price. And so why not gain the security of an insurance wrapper, prudent reserves, the capital, and the FSCS that's backing that up, as opposed to running all of the inflation, interest rate, longevity, and credit risks yourself. So it seems to be an attractive option. Another way that I like to look at this particular option, though, is if your plan is to buy out in a reasonable period of time, the best asset to invest in to match an annuity price is an annuity. So think about a buy-in that begins payments 5 or 7 years from now, and build that into your plan for how you're moving from your current position to a de-risked position. An interesting tool. So I'll pass it on to the next speaker and invite your questions probably after we all speak. Thank you.
Thank you.